So we're with WBZ's Kristina Rex outside the Karen Reed murder trial. This was a blockbuster week in terms of testimony. So Kristina, tell us all about State Trooper Proctor.
So you've heard the name Trooper Michael Proctor if you've been following this case. He was the lead investigator on this case. He's a state police trooper assigned to the Norfolk County DA's office. He testified that he was basically on call that weekend, which is how he got this case assigned to him. The reason his name has been so everywhere before his testimony is because the defense has, throughout the course of the trial, as well as outside of the trial, accused him of planting evidence, of running a shoddy investigation, of having conflicts of interest by having friendships with multiple witnesses. And so the defense's theory of the case, this cover-up narrative, Trooper Proctor really is at the center of it. And so that's where the anticipation for his testimony came from. Now, that being said, I don't know that that's necessarily what his testimony was about. His testimony, rather, including on direct examination by the state, so the testimony that's supposed to benefit their case, rather was him talking about text messages he sent on his personal cell phone to friends, to his wife, to supervisors about this case and about Karen Reed.
And he ended up reading many of them aloud in court.
Many of them aloud in court, more than once. And so it's important as a background story. The jury doesn't know this, but the reason these texts exist in the public sphere, if you will, is because of external investigations into the investigation of this case.
Right. He is under an internal investigation within the Massachusetts State Police.
Yes.
For the way
and then
handled it.
Also, there's a federal investigation into this case as well. The jury doesn't know that. The jury just knows that they got to hear his personal text messages read aloud in court. And this was read on the state side. He referred to Karen Reed as a number of disparaging curse words aimed at women, words mocking people with disabilities. He made a reference to hoping she takes her own life at one point in a text.
And her medical condition as well.
Her medical condition, you know, we found out Karen has these gastrointestinal issues, and he wrote in text messages very graphic, you know, mocking descriptions of that, as well as making fun of her physique, you know, kind of cracking jokes about the shape of her body, about her accent, really most things you could think of.
Right. So let me ask you, when these crass comments were read in his text messages, you were in the courtroom. How did the jurors respond?
It really is the first time we've actively seen jury reaction. I mean, I think I've told you every week, they have great poker faces, which they do. You saw now the jury, some hands to the mouth, some gasps, some looking at each other, some shaking heads. Not everyone, but certainly many of them. You know, there was open reaction to these text messages being read.
And even the judge herself.
Even the judge herself. There was this moment where it's a little hard for me to describe, and I will not swear, but there's this moment where he's going to read one of his texts, and rather than saying the curse word he says, 4-letter word, he spells it. And the defense attorney objects, and the judge says, "These are your words, Trooper Proctor?" And he says, "Yes, Your Honor." And she says, "You have to say them then," and made him read the swear out loud. And I think that was a telling moment for how uncomfortable he was. And then also several times he said, "These are very regrettable. These were juvenile. These were unprofessional," and apologized.
But he insists they had no bearing on his demeanor in terms of investigating the case, even though he made remarks to people he knew. I know that you are up against a deadline. Was there anything about the DNA expert who testified today or anything other than Sergeant Proctor that really stood out to you this week?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that this week alone could be the two polar opposite sides of this case personified. So on the one hand, you had Trooper Proctor and allegations of this shoddy investigation and these dramatic cursing text messages. On the other side today, still in the state's case, you had 3 forensic experts testify that they did the testing and they found what is most likely, based on their scientific information, they can never say definitively, John O'Keefe's DNA on a swab taken from Karen Reed's taillight, on a piece of hair found on the back of her car, on the broken cocktail glass that was found right next to his body, on the stains on his clothes, all tested positive for John O'Keefe's DNA. So that's why I say it's these two narratives, because on the one side you had Trooper Proctor and that drama, and on the other side, today was just forensic data connecting John O'Keefe's DNA to pieces of evidence found either on Karen's car or at the scene.
Hard evidence. So you had told us last week, Trooper Proctor was what to look for this week. What do we look for next?
I think in the state's case, we heard from defense attorneys today that they're being told the state's expected to wrap up on Tuesday. So what we're looking to is the end of the state's case and the beginning of the defense's. We know that for the state, we still have to hear from the medical examiner as well as some phone extraction experts. And then it's on to the defense. And I will say, this is important to note. I asked Karen today on the walkout of court, do you plan to testify? And she said she's leaving it up to her attorneys. It's their decision. She's willing to do anything.
Wow. Okay. Kristina Rex, anything I missed that you want to mention before we go?
Yeah, there's one other thing. Lieutenant Brian Tully testified in between Proctor and the forensic experts. He does a lot of cell phone expertise, and he's the person who pieced together Karen's whereabouts that day. And he painted this picture for the jury kind of painstakingly. A combination of cell phone tower data and surveillance footage capturing where Karen was, kind of showing that she was driving home from 34 Fairview around 12:34 in the morning, that she was driving away from John's house, presumably to go look for him, just after 5 in the morning. And then there was this moment where prosecutors essentially asked, wait a minute, she arrived at Jen McCabe's house at 5:35 in the morning, but the surveillance footage shows her at 5:18 driving there. Does that timing make sense? And Lieutenant Tully said, no, it's only a mile and a half drive. It shouldn't take that long. And the prosecutor hinted, could she have gone to 34 Fairview alone as a detour before she went to Jen McCabe's house? And I don't think that was, it was certainly not definitively proven. They said there's no surveillance footage, but it was suggested. And that was the first time I had heard that.
Very, very interesting. All right, Kristina Rex, thank you so much. And we will continue coverage of the Karen Read murder trial in the weeks ahead. As Kristina said, defense up by the middle of next week. Kristina, thanks.
Thank you.